Hey, Guybrush, it's voodoo time! And welcome to the Rubber Chicken with a podcast in the middle. A podcast all about the Monkey Island series of adventure games. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a topic that needs no introduction, but demands a great deal of explanation. The ending of Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge. So before we start our main topic, there's just one piece of Return to Monkey Island news that we can briefly discuss, which is that Ron Gilbert confirmed via Twitter that Herman Toothrot is back in the new game.
Yes.
I don't think that's a big surprise.
The return of Horatio Torquemada.
Yeah, he said that Herman is not going to be Captain Marley. He's not Elaine's grandfather. He said he's just gone back to being an old crackpot or something along those lines. Yes. And I think that's probably for the best. Yeah, I really didn't expect that they would follow on. I think I already said this in the first episode. I didn't think if they brought Herman back, I didn't think they'd follow on from Escape.
No, but it does bring up the question of how they're going to deal with Escape and Curse and things in this broader continuity idea.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to what Dave Grossman said. It sort of doesn't really matter. In that respect, that's probably a perfect segue for us to move on to the topic of today's discussion, which is the ending of Monkey Island 2. Probably the biggest unresolved series of questions or curiosity or enigma from the whole of the series history.
Probably the biggest cliffhanger of all time.
One of. Probably topped only by the question, what is the secret of Monkey Island?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that, even though I don't think that's really a thing. We'll get to it.
Yeah, so what I wanted to start with was the question, do you remember, because we played Monkey Island 2 initially when it was relatively new. Curse wasn't even out when we first played Monkey Island 2, but I'm not sure that we finished Monkey Island 2 before we played Curse. What do you remember? Because you will remember better than I do, having been older at the time.
I think you and I played Monkey Island 2 around 1994, 1995.
Yeah.
And I don't think we finished it at that point. I think we both finished it after we'd either played Curse or after we'd finished Curse.
Yeah, I think so. Because we didn't own a copy of it for a while. And you ended up, I think, finishing it at a friend's place. I think I didn't get a chance to actually play it through to the end until quite a bit later. It may have even been in the early 2000s, I want to say, that I actually finished LeChuck's Revenge for the first time, but my memory's pretty hazy on this. But we can briefly, before we get to the next question I wanted to ask, I guess I'll briefly summarize the ending. What are the things that happen? Guybrush has spent the whole game looking for the lost treasure of Big Whoop. He finds it by dynamiting through a layer of concrete underneath Dinky Island. It appears to be nothing more than a treasure chest with an e-ticket like they had at Disneyland in the 50s, 60s, 70s down there. And he falls into a series of underground tunnels where LeChuck appears and tells him that he's his brother. He finds the skeletal remains of his parents in the first aid station in these tunnels.
Yep.
Goes up a lift, which takes him to apparently the back alley of Melee Town from Secret of Monkey Island. He eventually builds a voodoo doll of LeChuck to fight back, because LeChuck's torturing him with a voodoo doll. Rips the leg off the doll. LeChuck falls to the ground and begs him to take off his mask, a la Darth Vader, to reveal that he is indeed Guybrush's creepy brother Chucky. And a bloke in coveralls comes in and says, "Hey, you kids aren't allowed in here." And they appear as little kids walking out of this tunnel into an amusement park where their parents thank Chucky for finding the other kid, who we assume is called Guybrush in this world, but we don't actually know that for sure. They never call him that in that final scene. And Guybrush is at first confused, but when they say that they're going to go ride the madly rotating Buccaneer, he's pretty excited, and they walk off, and Chucky stares evilly at the screen as they walk away. And the last thing we ever see from the world of departure of Ron Gilbert, Monkey Island, is Elaine standing next to the hole on Dinky Island saying, "I wonder what's keeping Guybrush. I hope LeChuck hasn't cast some horrible spell over him or anything."
I think you've covered everything there except for the fact that the dog comes in and picks up LeChuck's leg.
Yeah. The dog who may be the same dog from the Fat Island jail earlier in the game as well.
Yeah, Walt.
Walt, Steve Purcell's dog.
The dog.
And
yes, not Spiffy.
So what I wanted to ask you was, what was your reaction to the ending of Monkey Island 2 when you first played it as a kid?
As a kid, I remember thinking that it was a cool, creepy cliffhanger, but I already had Curse there, and Curse was tied into that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't as across the whole passing of the torch devs-wise, so it didn't really worry me, but I just thought it was kind of a cool ending. It didn't frustrate me. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, me either. I remember just thinking it was funny. I feel like I thought it was funny when I was a kid. That the thing I remember really distinctly finding very amusing is the fact that once you fall into the tunnels, in order to start off the sequence, you have to turn the light switch on. And
yeah.
I found that very funny as a kid, that there was just a light switch, like in
I thought that was funny.
modern day, and from my perspective, it was just a comedy ending where, I mean, with a pretty eerie subtext to it, but similarly, I never found it annoying or frustrating. I know some people say that they think that Monkey Island 2 is the worst one because they think the ending kind of spits in the face of the player and says, more fool you for taking this seriously kind of thing.
I find it really bizarre when people will take one element of a large thing and say that ruins the entire experience.
Yeah.
One other thing that I also remember thinking about the end of Monkey Island 2 is that the tunnels were the same as the tunnels on Fat Island.
Yeah.
On the way to Rum Rogers' place.
I think originally the tunnels from Fat Island to Rum Rogers Island were going to be a different piece of artwork, but there wasn't room on the disc. The special edition has some artwork by Peter Chan of a single... it was kind of an underground bridge with all these pipes and machinery everywhere. I mean, it's still tied into this idea that there was some kind of hidden infrastructure below the Monkey Island world. But I think partly that was to save disk space, but it definitely is one of the many ways in which that ending is foreshadowed, like Guybrush's dream about his parents when he falls off the big tree. There's a book in the Fat Island Library about collectible toy trucks that mentions the Junior Ultra Soldier Commando assault vehicle, which is in optional dialogue. Chucky will say that's why he hates Guybrush so much, because Guybrush broke his Junior Ultra Soldier Commando assault vehicle. If you buy the pen from the antique store, Guybrush says it's like the one from Mum and Dad's wedding.
Yes, I remember that. There's one other thing with the special editions where the beginning, when Guybrush is hanging and Elaine finds him dangling above the pit holding the chest, that's all vines and dirt and things in the special edition, I believe, and then in the original it's all twisted reinforced concrete.
Yeah, it's rebar. I think that's a misinterpretation on the part of the people who redrew the art for the special edition. I doubt it's intentional.
Yeah.
I think, yeah,
I'm just not sure.
they
Can't be sure.
Yeah, can't be sure, but I think probably they misinterpreted what that was meant to be, because, yeah, I think it's pretty clearly bits of rebar sticking out of the ceiling. Yeah, that's a good point.
I know that in the commentary that's mentioned, or in a video about the commentary that's mentioned.
Yeah, because clearly there's something weird going on, but it's not really clear what it is. So I guess that's the next question for us to talk about is, what do we think's going on at the end of Monkey Island 2? Is it an illusion? Is Guybrush just a kid in a theme park whose imagination was running wild? Is Chucky really his brother? Are his parents dead or alive? Or are they really his parents?
Let me start with what I used to think.
Yeah.
When we discussed this, which was that, yes, Guybrush was under a spell or a curse, and that's why we see Elaine at the end saying, I hope Guybrush is okay.
Yeah.
She's also saying, I wonder what's keeping him. But what's she expecting him to do? She's watched him fall down this huge pit. She expecting him to escape somehow? She's not going in to help.
No.
But yeah, I used to just buy into the kind of curse idea that, yeah, he was trapped in a carnival and then he escapes. Trapped in this kind of nightmare carnival where he believes he's a little kid.
Yeah. I think it's a good point with what Elaine says at the end. When you blow up the hole on Dinky Island, there's a brief cutscene of Elaine, and she hears the explosion from her house on Booty Island and says, that idiot better not be interfering with my grandfather's treasure. And it's quite clear that several people, including Elaine and LeChuck, actually knew where Dinky Island and Big Whoop were the whole time, and that wasn't actually any great secret at all. In fact, there's a sign on the beach at Dinky Island that says it's home of the legendary treasure of Big Whoop.
That's a kind of similar gag to the treasure of Melee Island, I suppose.
Yeah. And, so yeah, I think you said that's what you thought was happening, and yeah, I mean, it's the obvious explanation even within that game, is that Guybrush is under a spell. Like, the game says it straight out. There's not really any ambiguity about it. That line is there to explain what might be happening in the event that another game was made. But that's not stopped people from wondering whether or not there was still more to it. So, I mean, what do you think now? If that was what you thought before, what do you think now?
There are a number of possibilities. One is that the whole pirate thing is a facade, and that Guybrush is a child pretending to be a pirate. For example, someone who's been riding Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland and jumped off and is just imagining themselves as one of the pirates in that ride. Another is that he is cursed. Another is that both of these realities are real.
Yeah.
And that there's not necessarily one that's more important than the other, and that Guybrush is both a pirate and a child. What do you think happens?
I think I'm inclined to the same thing that you're saying, that really it's both. I think he's both a child in an amusement park and he's a pirate in this weird pirate world that's like an amusement park attraction. I think the Monkey Island world does exist, but the theme park world also exists. I think it's not that uncommon in certain media for a character to have a different identity depending on what world they're in, and that Guybrush can be a little kid and Chucky's his brother in one world, and he can also be this wannabe pirate, and LeChuck's this dangerous villain in another world at the same time.
Yeah.
what is the meaning of that? Well, we can go into that, I guess, in a little bit more detail. But I think, yeah, the idea that none of this matters is, or that it's like, that, oh, it's not real, it's just a dream, or it's just a child's imagination or something, is, I think there's more to it than that.
There's also the idea, well, I kind of link the two ideas of being in a theme park and playing a computer game.
Yes, yeah.
We are living vicariously through the game. In essence, we are the child imagining that they're a pirate.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's reflecting that back at the player.
Yeah, and I think this is very similar to what Ron Gilbert would much later do with Thimbleweed Park, where, spoilers beware, the characters discover that they're just characters in an adventure game, but I think Monkey Island 2 is a much subtler way of addressing a similar concept, in which the amusement park is an analogy or a stand-in for any kind of amusement, any kind of distraction or entertainment that is used to provide an individual with some kind of escape or alternative or diversion from real life.
Yes.
And in that sense, we're Guybrush, and as you said before, LeChuck is the unpleasant reality of real life coming knocking and forcing you to accept the truth.
Forcing you to grow up.
Yeah. And that LeChuck's revenge, therefore, in the game is not him torturing you with the voodoo doll for blowing him up at the end of Secret of Monkey Island or anything. It's him forcing Guybrush to wake up, to stop lying to himself.
So I think what we see is one of the big scenes that kind of ties into all this stuff is the fact that Guybrush travels back up to the Shinetop Alley in Melee Island.
Yeah.
And he sees the circus, and as you mentioned in the previous podcast, he says...
this is hauntingly familiar, is what he says.
So does he necessarily remember Melee Island? Of the events of Secret of Monkey Island happened?
Yeah.
And why do we see this scene?
Yeah.
Is it just there as an in-joke to be funny or cool? Is it that these realities are merged? Is it that something like a dream, these things just happen out of sequence?
Well, I'm more inclined towards that last one, that it's suggestive of the idea that reality as we experience it, and again, I kind of want to go into this more, is not necessarily something that happens in a logically consistent way. And we can talk about that a little bit more. What I wanted to talk about, just sort of after we talk about the in-universe sort of aspects of it, we can talk about that in a little more detail. I just wanted to sort of ask one last question, I guess, in terms of this. What is Big Whoop, in your opinion?
The Voodoo Lady talks about Big Whoop being the only way for Guybrush to escape the wrath of LeChuck.
Yeah, it's the secret to another world, or it holds the secret to another world.
Yes. So, the fact that it's also called Big Whoop is a joke.
Yeah.
And, like, that's what you call something that's not actually that big a deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Big Whoop to me was always the fact that you could escape LeChuck. This was always just my thinking, was that Guybrush escaped LeChuck by kind of turning in on himself and becoming a child and escaping reality.
Yeah, arguably it relates to what I was saying before about the idea that he can pass into a different world where he's just a kid and Guybrush, and LeChuck is just his annoying brother and not this evil monster. But at the same time, I think Big Whoop is that secret. It's true for everyone in the Monkey Island world, not just Guybrush. I think
Exactly.
if we believe that Captain Marley and the crew of the Elaine hid Big Whoop because it was so wonderful or so terrible that they never wanted anyone to find it, then perhaps it was true of everyone in this world that their world is a kind of fake. It's a kind of just a stage or a facade.
And that's why we see all this kind of backdrop-esque scenery. We
Yeah.
see the inner workings of the carnival. We see these metallic hallways beneath islands.
Yeah.
There's a light switch. The grog machine returns.
Yeah, the lift leading up to Melee Island and
Things
so
like
on.
that.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about too much is that Guybrush exclaims, "These are my parents,"
Yeah.
when he sees two skeletons
Yeah.
left in a waiting room that says "Lost Parents."
Yeah.
And there's no more detail in that scene.
No, how does he know that they're his parents?
He subconsciously knows, right? As you would in a dream.
In a dream, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's part of it. It feels like those tunnels under Dinky Island are a kind of a dream space in which reality is kind of whatever the person in there believes it to be, or it exists only in relation to the consciousness of an individual. And that sort of leads me to wonder, again, back to this question, does the Monkey Island world exist in and of itself, or does it only exist in relation to Guybrush? And we do see scenes from the point of view of other characters which suggest that it does exist from the point of view of other characters. Yep. But at the same time, the Monkey Island world is so fundamentally absurd that it doesn't really work. But then I was thinking about this, and I was thinking maybe, and this is part of the sort of terribleness of Big Whoop, maybe from the point of view of the characters in the Monkey Island world, maybe the quote-unquote real world is absurd and nonsensical. And a bit like the land of the living and the land of the dead in Grim Fandango is what I was thinking. Yeah, I think Big Whoop probably isn't remotely important, and I think that was intentional. I don't think Ron Gilbert and co ever meant for Big Whoop to be important.
No.
And it's probably, intentional that it's not. And I guess this leads on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which was, how do we interpret all this? What's this ending to Monkey Island 2 trying to say? And I've done a bit of research, a bit of background reading, and a bit of interpretation of my own. As you know, I've done a little bit of academic work on the Monkey Island series, just a little bit. I gave a paper about this last year at a conference, and there are various interpretations. I have one particular interpretation from a sort of analytical sense, but I've read others. A lot of the best scholarship on the Monkey Island games is not in English, because the games have always been more popular in Europe, even though they're American games. And so sometimes can be a little bit difficult to, with the language barrier, to investigate some of these things. But there are a few different ideas that I've kind of come across in my perusal. I think one of the most common ones, and one I was just looking at today that was in a French research paper, was that it was that comparison to Disneyland, the theme parks, to the idea that Monkey Island is reflective of, and the ending of Monkey Island 2 emphasizes this, the idea that the world is very hollow, very fake. It's made up of things that don't really mean anything in and of themselves. It's the modern world's very artificial, and that Monkey Island 2 the ending is reflective of that. I think that's certainly one way of looking at it. It's probably not an analysis that necessarily as interested in going into kind of the details like we were talking about before. I think another one that's come up is that idea that, like you were talking about before, is it about how we construct and inhabit fantasies to protect ourselves from the horror of everyday life? Has Guybrush undergone some kind of traumatic experience to do with his parents and or his brother that means that he wants to live in this other world? Is it that did his parents abandon him like he accuses them of doing in his dream? Are his parents dead? Is he adopted? Is the theory that people come up with, and are all these things some trauma that he's experienced that makes him want to inhabit this fantasy? And is that sort of another reason why people also don't like to believe that world isn't real, because it also makes it harder for people as players of the games to inhabit that fantasy of the Monkey Island world and to put themselves in Guybrush's shoes and go on this swashbuckling adventure with silly jokes and Coke machines that sell grog.
We reflect on our own experience as children. There's footage of you and I playing Lego as children, and we're playing Monkey Island.
Yeah.
So we're escaping into that world as well.
Yeah.
We're 6 and 4 or something.
Yeah. And it really captured the idea of the childhood imagination, the sense of adventure, that and it's because of Secret of Monkey Island. Secret of Monkey Island is the kind of archetypal pirate adventure with this twist, with this humorous twist to it, where nothing Guybrush does actually matters. LeChuck's Revenge is kind of the thing that arguably exposes that emptiness underneath the facade of the make-believe, arguably.
Yeah. So this is my I played LeChuck's Revenge earlier this year, and this is the thing I came up with. I might just read it verbatim from the message I told you, I sent you. So Guybrush decides the only way he can escape adult responsibility, facing up to his fears, is to escape to another dimension entirely. But he can't. Big Whoop doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I think that might be the overall message of LeChuck's Revenge. By not facing up, one is effectively rejecting the responsibilities of adulthood and allowing themselves to be a child. But in reality, it's A, not all it's cracked up to be, and B, not possible. So Big Whoop is the unattainable return to childhood that adults yearn for, which would in itself be a big whoop. That was my big amazing analysis.
Yeah, I think that's a good interpretation. I mean, by that logic then, do you think that when Guybrush does turn into a child at the end, how does that relate to the idea of him trying to avoid his growing up, avoiding his responsibilities?
You try to make a dialogue choice where you say, I'm a mighty pirate, I'm brave.
Yeah.
But instead, Guybrush says he just goes along with his parents. He just shrinks back into becoming a child. I think it's kind of reflected there.
Yeah, okay. So ultimately, is Guybrush a child in the Monkey Island world as well, in that interpretation? Yeah. But in that world, he never has to grow up in that world. A bit like Peter Pan, which is obviously one of the less acknowledged inspirations for Monkey Island. I think that's a good spin on it, and I think LeChuck's role definitely in that is he's the one who's dragging Guybrush back to reality. I've seen some kind of interesting sort of speculation. I think people tend to obviously go into the nitty gritty a little bit too much with some of this stuff, but people have even wondered, is LeChuck in LeChuck's Revenge even really the same person as he was in Secret of Monkey Island? I often found myself thinking, is LeChuck in the ending of Monkey Island 2 the same LeChuck that we saw earlier in the game? Is LeChuck even really there?
Yeah.
or did LeChuck actually get blown to smithereens when the fortress exploded? but, well, if
That's the thing.
Guybrush
I don't like to get really nerdy about it. Like, is the LeChuck? Why does he have the memories of
Chucky
of the ghost that was
Oh
destroyed?
yeah. It's like, but it doesn't matter. Is the thing that he can be both.
Right.
He can be the brother. He can be the mean brother and the evil monster at the same time. He can be Guybrush's brother and not be his brother at the same time.
He's also the boss fight at the end of both games. It's like, how do you have a boss fight at the end of an adventure game?
Yeah.
This way, and in the same as Secret, but it's also kind of reaffirming the idea that this is a game, this is an adventure game.
Yeah.
This is an experience, this is an interactive experience. This is Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you defeat LeChuck, but LeChuck still wins at the end of Monkey Island 2.
Still takes his revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it gets a little murky around the hilarious Star Wars parody.
Yeah,
which I don't think was as done at that point. It was already like a 9 or 10-year-old reference. And that joke is kind of so worn out.
Yeah, you hadn't had things like Toy Story 2, for instance, doing that joke again and stuff like that at that point.
No, you hadn't, but now it feels very tired now.
Yeah.
I can't really remember from the time how it felt. I think because I was a kid, I just thought it was funny. I liked Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I feel like it kind of muddles the seriousness of the ending. Not that it has to be serious. Like, these are funny adventure games. But I wonder how much that kind of can take away from any in-depth analysis.
Well, I
this
think
kind of thing.
This actually leads me to another interpretation that I've thought of about the ending of Monkey Island 2. Is the ending of Monkey Island 2 about the idea of twist endings and how arbitrary they are, and the idea that a twist ending has some value purely by being shocking and unexpected? So I think in the developer commentary in Monkey Island 2 Special Edition, I think Tim Schafer says that they just put as many twist endings or twists as they could into the ending to see kind of almost how far they could take the concept to kind of to the point of ridiculousness. We'll put in another twist and another twist and another twist.
Yeah.
To deliberately to poke fun at the idea that there needed to be some big twist ending at the end of the story.
This is something I mentioned before. It's how do you wrap up a game like this in a satisfying way?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the end of Secret is even necessarily that satisfying. And just treating it as a big joke. And I think it's been mentioned even recently that Monty Python and the Holy Grail was an influence on these games.
Yeah.
And that has the big kind of twist ending at the end where the whole thing falls apart. All the knights are arrested.
Yeah, by the modern day police.
By the modern day police.
Yeah, and
so it has that anachronistic modern day thing coming in as well.
Yeah.
I wonder how much this is also just paying homage to that and how much is just trying to be silly.
Yeah, exactly. And that came out, with the publication of the companion book with that Monkey Island 30-year collection, where the various developers were interviewed, and Ron Gilbert said Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and in particular Blazing Saddles, were the big inspirations for the ending, because of course in Blazing Saddles the hero and villain end up basically breaking out of the movie, and they end up watching the movie in the cinema. They're watching themselves. And I think that
they break into a whole host of other movies, sound stages and things.
And the wall between the quote unquote real world and the movie world completely collapse, and It's a very Mel Brooks kind of ending. Mel Brooks does a very similar thing at the end of History of the World Part 1, where a character from the Roman Empire storyline inexplicably shows up in the French Revolution storyline to save him, and a kind of Mel Brooks's character in the French Revolution and in the Roman Empire are sort of become the same person in that ending, because I guess they're both Mel Brooks or whatever, but it's that's similar as well. You know, it is fundamentally, I think, more a comedy ending than anything. A comedy ending about twist endings and about the relationship of the story with the viewer than probably any necessarily kind of big in-universe mystery.
Yeah. That's not to say that you can't try to analyse it.
Yeah, no. And it's certainly not an attempt to say that people shouldn't, because we've done it ourselves in this podcast, and it's fun to speculate. Dave Grossman said another inspiration was the film 3 Days of the Condor, which I was hoping to find the time to watch in anticipation of this, but I didn't get around to it. But it's a film about a CIA agent who ends up, I think, gets betrayed by everyone he thought that he could trust, and it's about, again, the idea that what you think of as the normal world and what appears to actually be the normal world are not consistent with each other. But to sort of continue on the Mel Brooks thing a bit, and when I gave this paper last year, I think I ended up having to... I had this thing about Blazing Saddles, and I ended up having to take it out, but the comparison I thought, was one to Blazing Saddles, but also, obviously, and we've talked about this a lot, is to David Lynch. Obviously, we've made this comparison multiple times now, but and this predates the Lynch film that I'm about to reference, but in Mulholland Drive, there's again the implication of, some people want to say, oh, well, part of the film's a dream in the mind of another part of the film, a character, but the most compelling argument I've read about that is that it's about the idea that people tend to mix up the act of telling a story with the story itself, and the idea that just because a story, for instance, has a beginning, middle, and end, it doesn't mean that the world it portrays has to be internally consistent or make sense. No. And people want to believe...
It's more about the tone and the story.
And
in this case,
the experience.
The pirates and the tropes around that.
Yeah. It's about the experience.
Yeah.
Of that feeling almost of unease, or the dreamlike nature of that ending is kind of the point. There isn't some intensely consistent set of ideas to be assembled together. It's meant to confuse you, arguably, perhaps because maybe real life isn't that as straightforward as sometimes we like to think it is, or maybe because we assume that stories have to be straightforward, but why do we assume that? So I think kind of it's one of those puzzles where the puzzle itself is the point. And I was telling you recently about a very recent adventure game, Who's Lila, and the mystery of Who's Lila is that Lila is the mystery of who Lila is. And I was kind of thinking, is it similarly like, if we think about The Secret of Monkey Island, is The Secret of Monkey Island the mystery of what The Secret of Monkey Island is? You know, is it?
Well, I think The Secret of Monkey Island is definitely something we're going to get into.
Yeah, is the ending of Monkey Island 2 good because it's a unsolvable conundrum? That's why it's so... That's one of the reasons it's so fascinating, on top of its eerie tone. And just that general sense of the uncanny that you experience walking around those tunnels under Dinky Island, which is just so perfectly done as kind of all these little things that have come up throughout the game suddenly bear out. And the thing about that ending is why it's so good is it's so confusing, and yet it is so perfectly Monkey Island at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is why
you don't feel like you've been removed.
No, I think this is why I wanted to ask what it was like. If you remember what it was like as a kid, because I feel like as a kid, all this stuff flowed together. I wasn't overthinking it or anything.
No, exactly, and that's the beauty of being a kid. I remember thinking that the Big Whoop Carnival, or whatever it is that the Guybrush and Chucky walk out into, looked like that's the first scene of Booty Island.
Yeah,
which made me think that the kind of the lines were blurred.
Yeah, and I just think that it was just like taking all of those jokes and ideas from throughout the first two games to the next level. As you say, the treasure hunt in secret with the little plaque from the Melee Island Chamber of Commerce that tells you to leave some treasure for other people.
Yeah.
It's like the logical extension of that. I mean, of course, Guybrush would hit a layer of concrete several feet below the ground and have to dynamite it open, and it's like what I was saying from the point of view of the Monkey Island characters, and when we're in that world, it makes sense, and yeah, I think that's why it's so great.
Well, where you're comparing it to Mulholland Drive, I had the idea of comparing it to another Lynch film, Lost Highway, which is kind of this boundless, infinite story that kind of it just cycles back on itself. And you think about Guybrush gets to the end of the story, walks into the carnival, then they're going to go ride the madly rotating Buccaneer, right? And is that him then entering the beginning of the secret of Monkey Island? Is that him, that firing his imagination, and then when he's just going back through that again and coming back out? Yeah, and that's the end of the ride.
Yeah, and that's
just
what I was
over and over again
wondering about what they'll do with the new one, and I think the fact that the new one is starting on Melee Island, or apparently it's starting in the amusement park, but part of it's going to be set on Melee Island, back where it all began. The thing that I always bring up, and that's always stuck with me, is the music from the end of LeChuck's Revenge, the last in that medley of music from the game that plays at the end, that starts with LeChuck's theme and goes through various Wood Tick and Fat Mansion and the Booty Island party, and ends with the theme from The Secret of Monkey Island. So have we gone back to where we
I was going to bring that
began? And I think like Michael Land probably just did that or Bajakian and McConnell, whoever decided on that, probably just did it because it sounded good, but it's kind of perfect that we are apparently going back to Melee Island as well, because that's the last, we heard that music upon our entry into Melee Island at the beginning, so... Yeah.
The original intention isn't that important. I'm sure Mel Brooks wasn't looking for interpretation during History of the World Part 1 or Blazing Saddles. Those were just done for laughs, those endings. But we're still able to look at them, and I wonder if that's going to mean that the Return to Monkey Island is going to kind of be The Secret of Monkey Island again, but kind of with a twist.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been thinking.
Guybrush has broken out of the loop, and that
is it sort of
changed?
Is it that adventure, but with a greater undertone of awareness that there's something more, or will it be just another adventure with Guybrush? We don't know. Man.
I don't know. I kind of hope it's both. Is it going to be the alternate 1985 when Biff's changed everything?
Yeah. So that's the ending of Monkey Island 2. You could talk about it forever if you really wanted to, Those were just a few things.
Yeah, and we can always come back to it if we come up with some new ideas.
Yeah, I thought those would be some things that would be
and it's
fun to discuss.
So just one other piece of news, and I don't really know what this means, but grumpygamer.com is down at the moment, Ron's blog. And when I say down, it's been... all the content's been removed, and all we've got is... He's taken it down. All we've got is 2 lines. I think we all need a timeout. Grumpygamer.com will be back soon.
Yeah.
And is that Monkey Island overload for Ron? Is that people complaining about artwork or something? I hope it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. Was it just too many people were posting? Yeah, I really hope people weren't bothering him about the art style. Or
is it just his phone's digging too much with comments?
Yeah.
It could also be that he's revamping whatever he uses to run it, WordPress or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ron, if you're listening, we love you.
Yeah, so that's the ending of Monkey Island 2. It's probably one of my favourite endings of any text that I've ever consumed, and probably it's a reason why it's part of the reason why I consider Monkey Island 2 to be have the honor title of being the greatest computer game ever made.
That's the reason people have been talking about it for 30 years.
However you interpret it, whatever's really going on, we'll never know. It's probably nothing, and the new game's not going to give us any answers, probably because there are no answers. It's not the point. The point is that it's so intriguing, and that's what's so great about it. And I
don't want answers.
I'll always be going back to that game and getting up to that bit and feeling nervous about when's LeChuck going to come into the room, and hunting through. I'll always get Guybrush to look at the little miniature railroad track and say, must be a pretty small railroad. just one of those little bits of descriptive dialogue that I really love, that just sort of speaks to that whole eerie feeling at the end, that none of this seems weird to him, and yet it is weird to him at the same time. It's just so great. I love anything that does that kind of stuff and does it well, and Monkey Island 2 is one of the things that does that kind of storytelling, atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, does it really well. So yeah, whatever you think of the ending of Monkey Island 2, I love it.
Yeah. It's the best way to end a game or anything, really.
It's just the perfect way to end those 2 games, really.
Yeah. And if it does frustrate you, also remember that this is one section of a game. It's not the entire experience. The rest of the game is amazing as well.
Yeah. That's gotten that out of my system for now. And next time we can talk about something a little less esoteric. This has been Rubber Chicken with a podcast in the middle. I'm Alistair.
I'm Gordon.
And...
Look behind you! A 3-headed monkey!